Welcome my friends, Seven Gray here. Thank you for joining me for this episode. A few days ago, my diesel heater, my primary heater for my cargo trailer conversion, quit working, and I've had it for about 5 or 6 months, and it's worked just absolutely fabulous. And many times I've run it overnight, turning it on at 10 or 11 o'clock at night and running it till 8 or 9 o'clock the next morning, and it runs just fabulous. Heats up this place, keeps it at a very even temperature, and I love it. But a few days ago it quit working, and I've been troubleshooting, trying to figure out why. Let's roll the intro and get into it. This is the controller here for my heater, and I have my heater installed right below my refrigerator. So down here you can see the orange heater there, and the refrigerator's right above it on a riser. And this is one of the vents here. There's 2 vents, one on each side. This is my 3rd heater to own of the diesel heater variety. These are the Chinese knockoffs of the original German heater, and you could buy these on Amazon for about $120, $130. They're an extremely good deal versus the German or Canadian versions, which run $1,200 to $1,500. Much more expensive, like 10 times as much, and they're practically identical, with the exception of probably the instructions. Chinese instructions are just terrible. I mean, the worst of the worst. But anyway, I've owned 3 of these. 2 of those were in my step van that I had before. The diesel heaters are just fantastic. So what's going on with the heater? Well, it's giving me an E10 code. There's probably like 15 different error codes, and the number 10 is sort of a generic catch-all, and it just means that it's not igniting, that the main chamber inside is not igniting. Now there's dozens of reasons for what this could be. A few of those can be eliminated by looking at the other error codes, which are not popping up. So what I do know is that there's not an electronic break causing the actual glow plug to fail to ignite. So I know that. Most common problems to cause a diesel heater to fail and experience the exact situation that I have are going to be threefold. It's going to be lack of electricity, which I've measured that. I know that that's good, or pretty sure that that's fine. Second one is going to be the lack of fuel. That is actually the second most common problem with the diesel heaters, and it has to do with the fuel line itself. If you have the flexible line like I have, which is the default that comes with many of the heaters, they expand and contract a little bit, and it's enough if you do a very long stretch of it that the pump doesn't get the proper pressure to send the fuel into the heater. So the common fix for this is to use very hardened nylon line so that it doesn't fluctuate up and down, and or shorten your fuel line. I'm going about 15 feet, which is about the maximum, and I do have the flexible hose, so that is one possible problem. So I purchased a kit with some different hose, and I'll address that as a possible issue if my primary suspicion is incorrect. So the number one common problem for an E10 error, at least according to my research, is to do with the actual little cylinder area around the glow plug. So the glow plug resides in a very small tubular type area, and that area is where most of the problems happen. Now, number one can be the air source, the air intake going into that area. Commonly bugs or other material can fly up through the air intake and get caught right at this area that goes into that little cylinder next to the glow plug. It's a tiny little hole, and if that hole gets plugged, then the air doesn't get in there, and then your heater will not ignite. So that's one thing that I'm going to open up and look at. However, the number one common problem is actually just inside of that air intake. There is a little tiny little cylindrical thing, which I'll show you later, and I believe it's called an aspiration screen. It is a tiny little cylindrical screen type device that goes around the glow plug. And its purpose is to take the fuel that comes into that area and to make it into a mist. Very similar to a carburetor on an automobile. So it's going to convert the fuel into a mist, and if this gets blocked up and built up with carbon and gook, then that fuel will not create a mist properly, and then the glow plug will not ignite. So that is the most common problem that happens with these diesel heaters. So I'm going to open up my heater and replace that and look at that little screen item. And I'm hoping, number one, that that solves it. If not, then I'll be looking at the fuel line for the possible solution. Number two, also be looking at the air intake there to see if it's plugged up. So in order to do that, I've got to remove the fridge. My fridge will just slide out off of this and then come down to this area in the middle. The way I built this is for a two-person job, just to slide the fridge out and be able to work on the diesel heater underneath. I'm going to try to do this solo today. We'll see how that goes. If not, I'll have to try to find somebody camped nearby and get them to come over and help me move this fridge out. I had to get some help from a neighbor to get the fridge out of here. It was a real tight fit, but now the heater's exposed. Here you can see underneath the fridge, the heater's over here on that side, and then I've disconnected the hoses there and the electrical plugs. So now I've got to go underneath and disconnect things underneath so that I can remove the heater, pull it outside so that I can work on it. Alright, I have the heater out now and I'm pulling it apart. This is what it looks like when it's apart. I've done this once before. This is the burn chamber here, so I've got to pull this cylinder out, and this is the glow plug area here, so I've got to pull that out, which I'm about to do, the circuit board up there. So about to pull all this out, then I'll clean the chamber inside. I'm going to change out this tiny little circular aspirator, which is this little guy right here, the screen, and I have to change that out. And hopefully this is the only thing that's really wrong, is this one little screen thing. It's the aspirator that makes the diesel into a mist form, sort of like a carburetor. Okay, chamber looks pretty clean now. Got to change out that little screen and check the air hole and then assemble the thing back together. Hopefully it'll work. Okay, don't know if you can see this clearly on here, but this is pretty built up. You can see it's pretty solid there on the buildup on that bottom side. So I'm pretty sure that this screen is exactly what is causing the problem. So I'm going to replace this, reassemble everything, and cross my fingers, hopefully it'll work. Alright, everything is back together. It went pretty smoothly. I only had one part where I sort of didn't get the install correct, and that was putting the plastic case back on before assembling the intake and outtake air hose on the bottom. So this is the plastic case here, and I didn't put that back on before this played in these two hoses here. So anyway, I just had to pull that back part, then put the plastic case on, reassemble everything. Took an extra 10 minutes. So now I'm going to try reinstalling it inside. I'm not going to screw it back down. I'm just going to get it in place and everything hooked up, the electric and the fuel, and test it out and make sure that it's working before putting the fridge back in and all that kind of stuff. So just got to get this set back in place, fuel hooked up, power hooked up, and test it. Okay, this is the moment of truth. I'm going to see if I can get this thing working. Put the fuse back in over here. That should give me power to everything. Hopefully the lights will come on. Alright, power is on. Probably need to prime it a little bit here first, so I'm going to do that. I'll turn off the camera while it's priming here. Alright, there it's going, priming. During the priming, it looks like everything's going. I can hear the pump clicking. The fans are whirring, everything looks correct here on the screen. So as soon as it finishes with the priming, then I'll actually try to fire it up and test it out. Crossing my fingers everything works well. If so, then I just have to secure the heater back down and attach a couple of things underneath to get the wires and stuff out of the way so that they don't accidentally get caught on something as I'm driving or pulling the trailer. Alright, I'm doing the actual test now. So hopefully this goes well. I think it will. During that priming thing, I actually heard the glow plug light up, so that's a good sign. I mean, that's really good. So I think everything is going to work great. This will take just a couple of minutes to get going. Okay, the pump is working here. Everything's looking good. It should ignite any second. Alright, the glow plug is now going, and I think everything's working well. It should just ramp up in speed and you'll have hot air coming out. Alright, hot air. This is just fantastic. Everything looks good over here. It is just running perfectly. I think problem solved here. So that's all I have for this episode. I'm really super stoked that I solved this the first time around with very little in the way of problems. The biggest problem was just getting the fridge out of the slot there. Need to just work that a little bit differently, give it a little more space so it'll come out easy. But anyway, that's all I have for this episode. Thank you so much for watching. Savor the moment, and I'll see you in a future episode.